If you don't live in the United States, the phrase sales tax might sound Chinese to you. You might be more used to hear the words value-added tax if you live in Europe, or good and services tax if you live in Canada, Australia, or even India. And if you're American, you might not even know what sales tax is, and that's why you're watching this. In any case, you're at the right place, because in this video, we'll break down what is sales tax and how different it is from the other taxes I mentioned earlier. So without further ado, let's get into it. So let's start with the basics. At its core, sales tax is actually a pretty simple tax. It's a tax added to the purchase of goods and sometimes services when someone buys something. That can be when you buy stuff at the store or even order on Amazon. The important thing to understand is that in the American system, sales tax is usually charged only at the final purchase, meaning when the actual customer buys the product, which is completely different from most countries in the planet, because in this case, businesses buying things from other businesses generally don't pay sales tax the same way consumers do. In other words, the tax shows up at the end of the chain, when the regular person pulls out their wallet. If your state has a 10% sales tax and you buy a product for $100, you'll actually pay $110. The store keeps the original $100, but the extra $10 is given to the government. The business basically acts like a middleman collecting taxes for the state. Now, if you find that pretty simple, it's because it is. Because when it comes to most countries, they actually use value-added tax, also known as VAT, and a lot of the others actually use a goods and services tax, also known as GST. Both are not exactly the same, but they're pretty similar. They have the same core idea, but slightly different branding and implementation. In many places, GST is just the name for a VAT-style system. The biggest difference of these two, compared to a sales tax system, is when the government actually collects the money. With sales tax, everything happens at the final purchase. But with VAT or GST, taxes get collected gradually at every stage of production instead of all at once. I'll give you an example so you can visualize better. Let's imagine there's a company making chocolate bars, and we'll say both systems, sales tax and VAT, have a tax rate of 10%. Let's start with the American-style sales tax system. In step 1, a cocoa bean supplier sells cocoa paste to a chocolate manufacturer for $10. No sales tax gets added here because this is a business-to-business transaction inside the production chain. Then, in step 2, the chocolate manufacturer turns that cocoa paste into finished chocolate bars and sells them to a retailer for $30. Again, still no sales tax in the usual sense because this isn't the final purchase by a customer. And finally, we get to step 3. The retailer sells the chocolate bars to you for $40. Now the tax finally appears. Because the tax rate is 10%, now you pay an extra $4 in sales tax, bringing the total price to $44. The government receives $4, and that's the end of the process. This is a pretty straightforward process. But now let's look at how the exact same chocolate moves through a VAT or GST system. So let's rewind to step 1. Cocoa beans become cocoa paste, and the supplier sells it for $10. With a 10% VAT, the supplier adds $1 in tax. So the chocolate manufacturer pays $11 total. But the supplier sends that $1 to the government. Now, in the second step, the manufacturer turns the cocoa paste into chocolate bars and sells them to a retailer for $30, like earlier. With VAT, 10% of the $20 added in value gets taxed. And so, $2 goes to the government. Then comes the final step, where the retailer sells the chocolate bars to consumers for $40. 10% of the extra $10 that was added in value by the retailer goes to the government. Though in most cases, when the consumer buys the batch of chocolate bars, he'll pay $4 in VAT out of pocket, but the retailer will have $3 of the $4 exempt in taxes. In any case, the government collects $4 in this process, but in different ways. And this is the big takeaway. Sales tax collects everything at the end. VAT or GST collects it little by little throughout production. That's pretty much the difference. Now you might be wondering why the United States hasn't switched to VAT or GST like most developed countries. And though there are many reasons, I'll just name some of them. First, there's the issue of state autonomy, which is a fancy way of saying American states really like controlling their own taxes. In the United States, sales taxes are mostly handled at the state and local level. Some states charge high rates, some charge lower ones, and a few states like Oregon, Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Alaska don't even have statewide sales tax at all. That flexibility is important to many Americans because states can shape their own economic policies without waiting for the federal government to make every decision. Switching to a national VAT or GST system would probably mean much more federal involvement in taxation, and that immediately becomes politically controversial. Then there's the administrative side of things. Since America already has an enormous system built around sales taxes that everyone understands, changing systems would be expensive, complicated, and probably pretty messy. Don't forget that the country has a population over 300 million people. Adding more steps to collecting taxes could become an administrative nightmare, though it would probably guarantee more tax revenue as it would be harder to fraud. And speaking of tax fraud, if you're an adult pretty much in any country on this planet, you probably need to pay taxes and keep your tax documents safely stored for many years, often more than 5 in most places. And so if you want good document bags to keep your tax papers, there are Amazon links in the description. If you buy one of them, it would also support the channel. That pretty much covers it all. If you liked this video, give it a like, and if you want more similar content, click on one of the videos showing at your screen right now. I'll see you on the next one.